2017 has become a rather disappointing year for highly anticipated indie titles, with games like the unfinished first-person shooter Strafe, the absolute mess of a launch that was Friday the 13th, and the platformer that clings to the past and all the problems of one, Ukulele. And sadly, the game that we're covering today is the latest one to be added to the list of disappointments this year. Cook Serve Delicious 2 is a cooking game created by indie developer Vertigo Gaming Inc. It is the long-awaited massive sequel to the critically acclaimed Cook Serve Delicious that released in 2013. While my views on the gameplay remain mostly the same as that of my preview, everything else about the game, however, slowly but surely drags it down from greatness.
Serve delicious.
Cook Serve Delicious 2 takes place after the first title. Having worked so hard to build your reputation and bringing your restaurant to the status of a platinum star, it is all of a sudden destroyed and taken away from you. The head executives of the tower your restaurant was situated in were arrested for stealing money from the company along with the businesses of the tower. Determined to rebuild that which you lost, you buy a place inside the Tarragon Super Tower, the largest skyscraper in the city, and it is here your journey begins to once again become the best chef in the world. The plot to Cook Serve Delicious 2 is simply backstory. There is no plot progression to the game, making it entirely gameplay based. While I don't necessarily mind that this is the case, there is one thing that I must say. If a game isn't going to include a plot per se, the gameplay and its mechanics had better be something of excellence. Cook Serve Delicious 2 can be played either as a single-player game or a local co-op game. In single-player, you must play using the mouse, keyboard, or both. In co-op, one player takes control using the keyboard and the other the mouse. Using the mouse is pretty obvious. The player simply clicks on the icons needed. For the player on the keyboard, they need to use the correct keys to play. For example, opening a customer's order is done using the number keys. Using the holding stations is done by holding tab and the number key associated with each station. And finally, for fulfilling customer orders, they need to use the letter keys associated with each of the ingredients and changing of the menus using the spacebar. As far as controls go, they are not too bad, even for the keyboard player. The only problem I would have is that the player on the keyboard does need to be genuinely very good with one, as inaccuracy isn't an option if you're to do well. When playing in co-op, it is highly recommended that the more experienced player, both of the game and the keyboard, should use these controls, as the mouse is definitely better suited to beginners. Either playing single player or co-op, you will have a selection of 30 restaurants in total to work for, each with a set of levels that you must complete in order to earn money and unlock new decor for your own restaurant. Money is used to buy new recipes that you can then use in your menus for your restaurant. You unlock new decor by leveling up and by performing well in each of the 300 plus levels across the various restaurants. How well you've done in each level is determined by how many average or bad orders you make throughout a day. If you make less than 8 bad orders, you will receive a bronze medal. If you make less than 4 average or bad orders, you receive a silver medal. And if you have a perfect day with no average or bad orders, you receive a gold. Each of the medals have their own rewards that you receive for achieving a certain number of. Bronze gives you a more basic decor, while silver gives slightly fancier decor. Gold medals reward you with new recipes, adding them instantly to your pantry, where they will be available for you to use in your menus right away. It does sound interesting, but the problem with the rewards is that they are presented using loot boxes, and what you get in them are completely random. When you first start playing, this doesn't really cause much of a problem, but the more you progress, the more tiresome it becomes, especially if you get decor that isn't to your liking or is unsuitable for the style of restaurant you want. A much more ideal system would be to have specific styles of decor that match the theme of each of the restaurants. That way you will know what you are getting and allows the player to focus on what rewards they want most, as opposed to it just being pot luck. The loot box concept would work better in shorter games, but ones that boast 60 plus hours and require you to play well, they become extremely frustrating. And that is exactly what happens in Cook Serve Delicious 2. It overall makes the game feel lacking in a sense of progression, and while you are unlocking new restaurants and levels, it never feels that you've achieved much other than just more of the same. As previously stated, each of the 30 plus restaurants in the game has a set of its own levels to complete, with each one increasing in difficulty. Each restaurant has its own menus, and as you progress through the levels, the recipes get more plentiful and complex. At first there is only one restaurant available, that being the hot dog eatery Max Wieners, but as you progress, new restaurants will unlock along with new levels for them. The bigger the establishment, the more complex the recipes become, adding in a gradual increase in difficulty as you make your way through the restaurants. Once you've selected a level, you begin by getting a dish started at one of the several holding stations. A single level can be anything from 3 right up to 8 holding stations. These become essential, particularly in the more difficult levels, as they give you a stock of cooked food that you will need to fulfill customer orders, lowering the amount you have to cook, assuming you keep on top of them and don't run out. Once you've started a recipe in the holding station, customers will slowly start to make their way into the restaurants, where you will have to fulfill their orders. This is done by either cooking the food to order or by serving the food from one of your holding stations. Throughout each day there are 2 rush hours, where orders will be constantly coming in, putting your skills of speed, accuracy and time management to the test. While in lower levels it is easier to manage, but in more difficult ones you can have up to 10 plus orders at any one time. As to how many customers will order in between the rush hours is dependent on the restaurant's buzz level. The higher that the buzz is, the more customers will come in throughout the day. To help keep up with the buzz, you can create side dishes at holding stations. These do take up one of the spaces of the holding stations, resulting in one less prepared dish, and they need to be regularly remade due to one being sold with each main dish, but they can be a real lifesaver. As if that doesn't sound manic enough, there are a few wrenches thrown into the pipelines. Throughout the day you will need to complete work tickets that include flushing the toilet, washing dishes, setting up mouse traps, and so on. While they generally only take a couple of seconds to complete, they have a shorter waiting time, and if you fail to fulfill them, they majorly decrease the buzz of your establishment. Along with the many restaurants you can work for, there is also your own restaurant. Here you can make the menus how you see fit with the recipes that you've unlocked. Each menu can have a total of 5 entrees, 3 sides, and 3 drinks, but how many you use is up to you. The buzz of your restaurant is increased with each day you play, with the game being increased the better you perform. There are also a number of objectives and tasks to complete for you to gain additional rewards. It is a great feeling when playing, as it really makes you feel like a professional chef. It is a really exciting and adrenaline pumping gameplay that never gets old no matter how long you play the game. Despite this being the case, it isn't without its problems. Problems that don't begin to surface for quite some time. The more difficult levels of the game, even in the early restaurants, become practically impossible to complete in single player. An example of this would be the last level of Big's Burgers, the second restaurant you can work for in the game. You will have 8 holding stations along with a maximum of 11 orders at any one time. Along with that, it has a buzz of 90%, resulting in a constant rush of customers' orders coming in at all times, and customers only having a waiting time of 4 seconds before they become impatient. To make things worse, there are no side orders available to increase that. It makes the level absolutely impossible to play on your own, and even in co-op, it is a challenge. Which brings me to the second issue, and that is the gameplay of co-op mode. It is without a doubt utter fun in the medium to hard levels, but the easier levels are boring as there just isn't enough to do with the exception of the 2 rush hours for both players to keep active. One player could easily hold the fort while the other made a cup of tea. It is that easy. There is literally no difference in the gameplay between single player and co-op. What should be done is the single player's difficulty lowered a bit, particularly with more difficult levels, while in co-op the levels need to be ramped up a bit. Along with that, playing your own restaurant isn't all that interesting. It isn't really any different from that of the others with the exception of the objectives. It feels lacking, and that something is missing. It is, after all, your restaurant, and it should play as big a part of building from the ground up as your own reputation is, which is done by simply cooking. But it isn't, and it makes playing it rather bland. It is a shame, as if it wasn't for those issues, the gameplay of the game would be practically flawless. The game is extremely enjoyable to begin with, but as you progress, frustration begins to grow, ultimately ruining what would otherwise be a superb experience. The restaurant designer is one of the big features of the sequel. It allows the player to design their restaurant how they see fit with the decor that they have unlocked by playing the game. The concept is great, but how it is designed is completely the opposite. The game has well over 1,000 items in total to unlock and use to decorate your restaurant, including tables, booths, pictures, lights, counters and so on. The problem with this is that you have such a small amount of space to work with that so few of these items can be placed at any one time. This makes most of the items useless, unless you want to change the style or theme of your restaurant. The interface works in a similar fashion to that of The Sims, where the items are sorted in categories. You can then choose a category and then scroll through the items in search of what you're looking for. Once you've selected the decor you want, it can be placed where you feel it best suits. The problem here is that the interface is extremely unintuitive and anything but easy and pleasant to use. When going through your items in search of one that you're looking for, you can only scroll one item at a time. A much more efficient way of doing this would be to use a click and drag scroll motion. Either that, or increase the size of the item interface and have 8 decor in one box, and then an arrow to click and move to the next bunch, just like in The Sims. Overall, the designer is a nice concept, but one that is highly unfinished. It feels very early in development and anything but polished or tested. In many ways, I wish it actually didn't exist, as it, along with the reward system that it is entirely associated with, just brings down the game from its greatness. Cook Serve Delicious 2 is a game that has immense potential, so much so in fact that it could easily blast any other title of its genre right out of the water. The problem with the game is that the difficulty of its development really shows in almost every regard. The one saving grace of the game, the gameplay, has its problems, and everything else is unfinished, unpolished, or badly designed. I admit that I had utmost fun with the game, and it is quite addictive, but there are just too many issues to ignore. What started off as an 8 or 9 out of 10 title slowly began to decrease as more and more problems became apparent as I progressed. While enjoyable, the lack of a sense of progression, imbalanced gameplay, a poorly made restaurant designer, no difference in between difficulties with single player and co-op, and a boring reward system, and ultimately an unfinished game, with content still being added, the negatives vastly outweigh the positives. I can see this being a great game in time, but I can only rate a game based on how it is presented to me, as opposed to what is promised in the future. And with that, I give Cook Serve Delicious 2 a 4 out of 10. From a personal standpoint, I love Cook Serve Delicious 2, but when looking at it from a professional critical perspective, it is a troubled game that is yet to release its inner brilliance. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, thank you and have fun.